10. Mysterious ancient sites in the Outback. Nobody can explain. The red earth stretches endlessly under the Australian sun, hiding secrets that archaeologists still cannot explain. While tourists flock to Uluru and the Great Barrier Reef, deeper in the Outback lie ancient sites that challenge everything we think we know about pre-colonial Australia. Stone arrangements that predate Stonehenge, carvings that depict creatures no human should have seen, and structures so precisely aligned with the stars that modern engineers struggle to replicate them. These are not legends. These are real places, documented, measured, and completely unexplained today. Today, we examine 10 mysterious ancient sites scattered across the Australian outback, each one raising more questions than answers. Some suggest advanced astronomical knowledge. Others hint at contact with cultures that should never have reached these shores. This is not a tour of Australia's greatest hits. This is a journey into the very places that make archaeologists uncomfortable, where the timeline of human settlement starts to crumble. Welcome to the mysteries the textbooks carefully ignore. Before we venture into the unknown, if you value documentaries that explore what mainstream sources overlook, subscribe now. Your support allows us to keep investigating the stories others won't touch. Now let us begin where science ends and mystery takes over. The Wurdi Youang stone arrangement. Australia's forgotten Stonehenge drive west from Melbourne for 2 hours, and you will reach the Wurdi country near Little River. There, on a volcanic plain, sits a stone arrangement that should not exist according to conventional archaeology. The Wurdi Youang stone arrangement consists of 100 basalt rocks carefully positioned in an egg-shaped oval stretching 50 meters across. But here is what makes scientists pause. The stones are aligned with the setting sun at the solstices and equinoxes, creating a functioning astronomical calendar. Astrophysicist Ray Norris from CSIRO examined the site and confirmed the alignment is too precise to be accidental. The probability of random placement creating this accuracy is less than 1 in 10,000. Aboriginal oral traditions place this site at over 20,000 years old, potentially making it the oldest astronomical observatory on Earth. That claim makes archaeologists deeply uncomfortable because it predates Stonehenge by 11,000 years and challenges the narrative that sophisticated astronomy emerged only in the Middle East and Europe. The Victorian government listed Wurdi Youang as a protected site, but academic institutions remained strangely silent. No major excavation has been funded. No carbon dating of the surrounding soil has been publicly released. The site sits there, documented and ignored, while researchers argue about whether Aboriginal Australians could have possessed such advanced knowledge. The stones know the answer. They have been marking the seasons for millennia while the debate continues. The Gosford glyphs, Egyptian hieroglyphs in the bush north of Sydney, deep in the Brisbane Water National Park, a sandstone rock face contains over 250 Egyptian hieroglyphs carved into the yellow stone. Local bushwalkers discovered them in the 1970s, hidden in a gully surrounded by eucalyptus trees and ferns. The glyphs tell a story, translated by some researchers as the journey of an Egyptian expedition that became stranded in Australia around 2,500 years ago. The text describes the death of their leader, Jess Ebb, and the desperate attempts of his brother to transport his body back to Egypt for proper burial. Mainstream Egyptologists dismiss the glyphs as a modern hoax, but that explanation has problems. The carving style matches the Old Kingdom period of Egypt, with specific grammatical structures and symbols that were unknown to the public when the glyphs were supposedly faked in the 1900s. Some symbols depicted at Gosford were only identified by Egyptologists decades after the supposed hoax was created. The weathering patterns on the stone suggest centuries of exposure, not decades. Chemical analysis of the oxidation in the carved grooves indicates significant age. Yet no university will touch this site with formal research funding. The glyphs remain there in the national park, slowly eroding, while tour groups visit and academics refuse to investigate. Either someone with expert knowledge of ancient Egyptian grammar and access to obscure hieroglyphs carved an elaborate hoax in a remote gully for no apparent reason, or something very strange happened on the Australian coast 2,500 years ago. The Kariong walls, precision stonework. Nobody built less than 2 kilometres from the Gosford glyphs. Another mystery sits hidden in the bush. Massive stone walls, constructed from precisely cut sandstone blocks, rise from the forest floor, some sections standing 3 metres tall. The blocks fit together without mortar, edges so tight that a knife blade cannot slip between them. This construction technique, known as ashlar masonry, was used by ancient cultures in Peru, Egypt, and Greece, but never documented in pre-colonial Australia. The walls form what appears to be terraced platforms, partially buried under centuries of leaf litter and soil. Aboriginal elders in the area have no oral tradition explaining who built these structures. The Darkinjung people say the walls were already ancient when their ancestors arrived thousands of years ago. Geologists examining the site confirm the blocks were quarried and shaped, not naturally formed. Tool marks are visible on some surfaces, showing deliberate cutting at precise angles. The problem is that Aboriginal Australians did not build permanent stone structures. Their technology focused on mobility and adaptation, not monumental architecture. So, who built the Kariong walls? Official explanations claim they are the remains of a settler farm from the 1800s, but property records show no such farm existed in this location. The stone cutting predates any European settlement in the area. Carbon dating of organic material trapped between the blocks suggests the walls are at least several hundred years old, possibly much older. The site remains unexplained, fenced off by the National Parks and Wildlife Service, slowly disappearing back into the forest, while researchers debate whether to acknowledge its existence. The Sarina serpent, a carving that predates known settlement. In the hills behind Sarina, in North Queensland, a massive stone carving depicts a serpent coiled across a granite boulder the size of a small house. The serpent's body measures over 9 metres long, carved in shallow relief across the weathered rock surface. Local Aboriginal groups identify it as a rainbow serpent, a creator being central to Dreamtime stories. But here is the problem. The weathering on this carving is so severe that geologists estimate it could be 40,000 years old, placing it before the currently accepted date of human arrival in Australia. The serpent's head points directly at a natural spring that flows year-round, one of the few permanent water sources in the region. The carving is positioned so that during the wet season, rainwater channels down the serpent's body toward the spring, as if the carving itself directs water to the source. Researchers who study megalithic sites note this kind of hydrological engineering appears at ancient sites worldwide, from Malta to Peru. But Aboriginal technology was not supposed to include water management on this scale. The Sarina serpent watches over its spring, silent, ancient, beyond comfortable explanation. The Queensland Museum knows about it. Local historians have documented it. Yet it appears in no major archaeology journals, tucked away in regional publications where controversial findings go to be forgotten. Either the carving is far younger than the weathering suggests, or humans were in Australia much earlier than we believe. The Gympie Pyramid, the terraced hill. Nobody admits exists near Gympie in South Queensland. A hill rises from the surrounding farmland in a series of regular stone terraces. From certain angles, it resembles a step pyramid, each terrace level and parallel, constructed from stone slabs weighing several tons. Local tradition holds that Italian miners discovered the terraces in the 1860s, calling it the pyramid. Historical newspaper accounts from the Gold Rush era describe the structure as an ancient temple, with carved stones and possible burial chambers. But over the decades, much of the site was destroyed. Farmers used the stone for building materials. Roads were cut through the terraces. What remains today is a shadow of what once stood. The controversy around Gympie is intense. Skeptics claim the hill is entirely natural, that the terraces are simply erosion patterns misinterpreted by people wanting to find something mysterious. But photographs from the early 1900s show clear artificial stone placement, regular steps, and aligned blocks. A stone head was found at the site, carved in a style resembling South American or Southeast Asian art. It disappeared into a private collection before proper study could be conducted. The hill continues to erode. Each year, more evidence washes away or gets buried under suburban development. What could have been Australia's most significant pre-colonial site is now a battleground between believers and skeptics, while the truth literally crumbles under their feet. The Nhulunbuy Standing Stones, megaliths in Arnhem Land. In the restricted area of northeast Arnhem Land, far from tourist routes and requiring special permits to access, stand several groups of large stones set vertically in the red earth. These are not natural formations. They are dressed stones, shaped and positioned deliberately, weighing up to 3 tons each. Some stand alone, others in clusters, forming rough circles. The Yolngu people who live in this region say the stones mark sacred sites connected to creation stories. But they also say the stones were there before their people arrived, placed by beings from the Dreamtime. What makes these stones particularly intriguing is their similarity to megalithic structures found across the Pacific and in places like Karnak in France or the Standing Stones of Scotland. The engineering required to move and position 3-ton stones without modern equipment is substantial. Aboriginal groups in the area did not use this kind of monumental stone work, yet here they are, undocumented in mainstream archaeology, accessible only to those with cultural permission. A handful of researchers have visited the site, always accompanied by traditional owners. Their reports describe stones with astronomical alignments, others marking water sources or territorial boundaries. But detailed study is prevented by the site's sacred status and remote location. The Standing Stones of Nhulunbuy remain one of Australia's least known megalithic mysteries, hidden in plain sight in one of the most restricted areas of the country. The Kow Swamp remains, bones that don't fit the timeline. In the Murray River region of Victoria, archaeologists in the 1960s excavated one of the most controversial burial sites in Australian prehistory. The Kow Swamp remains included over 40 individuals with skeletal features so archaic they shocked the research team. The skulls displayed thick brow ridges, receding foreheads, and robust bone structure, unlike modern Aboriginal Australians. Carbon dating placed the remains between 9,000 and 13,000 years old. This created an impossible problem. At that time in Australia, Homo sapiens should have already been fully modern anatomically. Yet these bones looked like something from a much earlier stage of human evolution. Some researchers suggested the Kow Swamp people represented a separate migration into Australia, a population that later died out or was absorbed. Others proposed that the archaic features were the result of artificial cranial deformation, a practice where infants' heads are deliberately shaped by binding. But that explanation struggles to account for the overall robustness of the skeletons. The debate grew so heated and politically sensitive that in the 1980s, the remains were returned to Aboriginal communities and reburied, ending any possibility of further study. Now the bones rest again in the earth near the Murray River, and the questions they raised remain unanswered. Were they evidence of multiple human migrations into Australia? Did they represent genetic diversity now lost? Or did they indicate something stranger about human evolution in isolated populations? The earth keeps its secrets, and some doors, once closed, do not reopen. The Burrup Peninsula petroglyphs, art from the Ice Age. On the rocky shores of the Burrup Peninsula in Western Australia's Pilbara region, over 1 million ancient rock carvings cover the redstone landscape. The petroglyphs depict animals, human figures, and symbols etched into the hard rock surface. Some show thylacines, the extinct Tasmanian tiger, proving the art is at least several thousand years old. But others depict animals that should not exist, creatures resembling dinosaurs with long necks and tails, beings with features that match no known Australian fauna, marine animals that appear to be dolphins or whales, carved kilometres inland from the current coastline. The most controversial aspect of the Burrup rock art is its potential age. The peninsula was connected to the mainland during the last ice age when sea levels were lower. Some petroglyphs sit in areas that would have been flooded when the seas rose around 12,000 years ago. If true, this makes the Burrup carvings among the oldest continuous art traditions on Earth, stretching back 30,000 years or more. The art style changes over time, showing evolution from simple figures to complex scenes, but the tradition never broke. Generation after generation, people came to these rocks and added to the gallery. Gas processing facilities sit adjacent to the rock art. Vibrations from machinery, dust, and pollution slowly degrade the carvings. Heritage organisations have called for protection, but economic interests often prevail. The petroglyphs endure, for now, witnesses to tens of thousands of years of human presence. The Twin Falls geoglyphs, messages visible only from the sky. In the remote Gympie region of northwest Australia, aerial surveys in the 1980s discovered massive geometric patterns etched into the landscape near Twin Falls. The patterns consist of long straight lines, circles, and rectangular shapes cleared of vegetation, some extending for over 200 metres. They are only clearly visible from the air, leading to immediate comparisons with the Nazca lines of Peru. Local Aboriginal groups say the patterns are sacred, created by ancestral beings, but they offer no explanation of how or why such large-scale ground art was created by a culture without the ability to view it from above. Archaeologists who studied the site found evidence of stones deliberately arranged to form the lines, not just natural clearings. The effort required to create these patterns across rugged terrain is considerable. But the purpose remains mysterious. Were they ritual pathways, territorial markers visible to trading partners approaching from high ground? Or did they serve some astronomical function we have not yet identified? The Gympie is one of the most isolated regions of Australia, and many sites remain unexplored due to access difficulties and cultural sensitivities. The Twin Falls geoglyphs represent just one example of what might still be hidden in the vast expanse of northern Australia. Satellite technology now allows researchers to survey remote areas without setting foot on sacred ground, and each new survey reveals more mysteries. The land yields its secrets slowly, and many patterns may still remain undiscovered beneath the spinifex and red dirt. The Uluru Water Mystery. Engineering beneath the rock Uluru, the iconic red monolith in Central Australia, is known worldwide as a natural wonder and sacred Aboriginal site. What is less known are the complex water management systems carved into the base of the rock by its traditional owners, the Nhulunbuy people. These are not simple pools or catchments. They are sophisticated channels, filters, and storage systems that collect, purify, and store rainwater from the rock's surface. The engineering shows deep understanding of hydrology, erosion patterns, and long-term water storage in one of the driest environments on Earth. Some of these systems are carved directly into the solid rock, requiring tools and knowledge that challenge our assumptions about pre-colonial technology. The mystery deepens when you consider the age. A Nhulunbuy oral tradition describes these water systems as ancient, created by ancestral beings during the Dreamtime, but maintained and improved by countless generations. Geologists examining the tool marks and weathering patterns suggest some channels could be several thousand years old. The precision of the carving, the understanding of water flow and filtration, and the ability to work the extremely hard sandstone of Uluru all point to a level of technical knowledge rarely attributed to hunter-gatherer societies. But the Anangu were not building monuments. They were ensuring survival. Every drop of water in the desert means life or death, and their ancestors engineered systems that still function today. These channels continue to fill during rare rains, providing water for wildlife and people exactly as they have for millennia. The mystery is not whether the systems work, but how such sophisticated engineering developed in a culture that left few other permanent structures. The answer may lie in understanding that survival itself demands the highest technology of all. What these sites tell us about Australia's hidden past 10 sites spread across the continent, each one challenging the simple story of Aboriginal settlement we learned in school. The mainstream narrative describes Aboriginal Australians as nomadic hunter-gatherers who arrived around 60,000 years ago, lived in harmony with the land, and left few permanent structures. That story is true, but incomplete. These mysterious sites suggest something more complex. They hint at astronomical knowledge that rivals ancient civilizations elsewhere. They show engineering capabilities that we are only beginning to appreciate, and they raise uncomfortable questions about contact, migration, and the possibility that Australia's past contains chapters we have not yet read. The resistance to studying these sites seriously comes from multiple directions. Some archaeologists fear being labelled fringe researchers if they pursue controversial evidence. Aboriginal communities sometimes restrict access to protect sacred sites from exploitation. And there remains an uncomfortable colonial attitude that assumes sophisticated knowledge could only have come from outside Australia. But the evidence sits in the landscape regardless of our discomfort. The stones at Wurdi Youang still mark the solstices. The glyphs at Gosford still puzzle Egyptologists. The walls at Kariong still stand. Ignoring them does not make them disappear. What we need is honest, respectful investigation that acknowledges both scientific rigor and indigenous knowledge. These sites belong to traditional owners, and any research must center their perspectives. But we also owe it to history to understand what these places represent. They are human heritage, pieces of our species' story that challenge us to think bigger about what our ancestors achieved and how cultures developed in isolation. The Outback holds answers to questions we are only beginning to formulate. Every site we study, every carving we document, every stone alignment we measure adds another piece to a puzzle that spans continents and thousands of years of human ingenuity. So what do you think? Are these sites evidence of advanced ancient knowledge we have underestimated? Do they suggest contact between cultures that conventional history says never met? Or are they natural formations misinterpreted by people eager to find mysteries? The evidence sits in the red earth and weathered stone, waiting for those willing to look without prejudice. Share your perspective in the comments below. This community values thoughtful discussion about the mysteries mainstream sources ignore. Remember to subscribe to support independent documentary work that explores what textbooks leave out. Thank you for journeying into the unknown with us. Stay curious. Until the next time.